I know what you're saying, Herb, but you're saying like, well, why? Where's the money in this? They didn't have to. These kind of cases didn't have to be money. There's people that are
Mr.
convicted of
Dowd,
murder for the same thing. They
The
want to, and then once they're convicted, they're going to protect their conviction.
main reason I ask about money because I interviewed an ex-Rampart LAPD, and they were making a case, but they were getting a lot. They were stealing money from everybody. They were robbing
well,
people.
in my case, there's an
LA.
influence.
I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah,
go ahead, Mr. Dow.
go ahead, Mr. Dowd.
And LA is a different animal than the NYPD. I
Okay.
mean, was there corruption in NYPD? There's bad cops all over. But like LA, those police departments are so small and they're fractured because you have the LAPD, you have
Sheriff.
the sheriff's department. In New York, it's the NYPD. There is no sheriff's department. And it's a big monolithic police department. And they did have checks and balances. So the corruption that you're talking about in LA is very difficult to happen in NYPD because there's 38,000 cops and bosses, and you can never keep a secret. But a conviction, you're the good guy. I'm convicting this guy he's a rapist. Why? Because my daughter, my nephew, my niece says she is, and that's how these innocent people get convicted.
Well, if I may,
A different animal compared to LA.
Okay.
things they did to get a wrongful conviction in my trial. I mean, all of my files, I would be happy. I'm going to have either Mr. Siegel or another attorney that I used to work with. He's retired now. I would like to send you everything. So I want at least my appeal numbers, my 440s. I had $3.7 million in a bank account. I'm never good with numbers, so I had a CFO, may he rest in peace, named Phil Caruso. Now, I brought this up to, he's a very famous attorney, and I've spoken with him on legal phone calls in Mohawk. Let me give an honorable mention to Joseph Carrazzo Jr. He represented John Gotti Jr. 3 times at trial and beat the U.S. Attorney General. And his father, a very good man, very respected man, I had the honor of meeting and spending time with in 2008. And when I told him what happened with me, his exact words were, and I don't let nobody call me kid except for my father and Joseph Carrazzo Sr. And he put his hand on my hand. He said, "Kid, you got to get that off your jacket." I never knew about any of this going on. There was politics that went on. There was $3.7 million in a bank account the jury never got to hear about. I didn't know that Diane, which is in her real name, was seeing Phil Caruso. Okay. And I had mentioned Caruso to this dear friend of mine. And he said, you have the green light. You just get that off your jacket. Tell the truth. The jury never heard. The jury heard her say she worked. And I'm not knocking you, Diane, if you see this. I'm really not mad at you. You know, from my heart, from the center of my heart, I've learned more about law and scripture and everything else. Like my father actually evolved into the man my father wanted me to be, forcing myself to go to the law library. And I really needed to address that and say that in case Diane sees it. But I didn't know she was in a relationship with Phil behind my back. Phil embezzled over $250,000 of my money, and I had fired him. And he was he made the newspapers, 2013. Reputed Gambino associate, Phil Caruso. I sent you photos of the guy with one of my artists back in the day, Papa Don, the dark-skinned brother. I was bringing him out before Akon came out back then. And they kind of had the same demographic of listener. He could sing R&B, he could spit. He had done time for robbery. Papa Don, if you're out there, man, honorable mention. The brother Raheem Bia as well. The bottom line is, Mr. Caruso was in Married to a Mobster, VH1 reality TV show that didn't do so well. I think it was 2008 or 9. He's in Maxim magazine, the same photo I sent you. He was my CFO. His Social Security attached to Patriot Records, my record label then. They're in a relationship. Phil's laying low for me.
She's in a relationship with who?
With Phil Caruso.
With the complainant? With the complainant?
Yes. And he was hiding from me. And he knew damn well.
Phil Caruso, he was also your CFO?
Yeah, he went into hiding. He stole.
So he was your CFO and she was sleeping with him?
Behind my back. After I fired him, he was kind of laying low because he knew I wasn't going to make a complaint against him in the DA's office. I wasn't raised like that. You stole from me. You can return what you took from me sneakily. I don't respect a man who sneaks. The guy pulls a gun on me and gets me. He got me. I'll rush the guy with the gun. I'm being honest. I'm not trying to act tough. Anybody knows me growing up, any officers from Sing Sing, any officers from Rikers Island, whether I'm in the street or I'm in prison, I'm the same guy. If I'm not armed and someone got a knife or gun, I'm rushing them, bro. I'm just keeping it 100, Mr. Dowd. I'm being honest. I hope correctional officers from Sing Sing, from Rikers Island, from Mohawk, Sergeant Miller from Mohawk would come in. There's a gentleman named Big Swift. He's homie. He's 8. And he's like 6'8", 6'9", 400 pounds. We're in the bathroom talking. That's my son. Called me uncle all the time. And a sergeant named Miller came in at Mohawk Correctional Facility. It's a medium. When my classification drops, you're in dorms, no longer cells. I'm talking with Big Swift, the homie, and JR, too, light-skinned JR from Syracuse. He's also ape. He's blood. They came in the bathroom, and he said, yo, what's going on, Mr. Fingers? I said, Sergeant Miller, I don't use that name no more. I'm speaking with these gentlemen. Please excuse us. So I'm just trying to say, guys in my trial, men on my jury, all they thought about was this guy gets in a cab with guns and goes to the Bronx to confront drug dealers because they're not built like that. I'm not trying to be tough. I'm keeping it 100. The laws now are so call 911 for everything. I'm a different man these days. I'm going to evade trouble by all means, but back in the day.
Let's go back to one thing real quick, because
Yeah, I'm sorry,
what
Mr.
happened,
Dowd.
I think people are going to get lost in what happened.
Well, I'm
She's
sorry.
accusing you of kidnapping her the night of when the police came,
And now I'm going to.
And they did not arrest you that night.
They didn't arrest me because she didn't have a mark on her. At trial, they lied and said they saw injuries.
Let's go back to what we said before. And the
Yes,
reason
sir.
why it was compelling to our company is
Yeah.
that you were not arrested that night, and that she did seek out another detective who then called in a favor, and had this change from a typical domestic violence case with no crime to a rape and kidnapping with a gun.
Well, Mr. Dowd, before I touch on one last
That's
thing,
where these wrongful conviction cases, and then for my take of this is the government then builds a case because they want a conviction. So the district attorney's office, and people need to understand this, they are a political machine that looks to build cases to get convictions and not the truth. And the reason why you have wrongful convictions is because their job is really to seek the truth, not just to convict people.
Yeah.
And until we get that squared away with these district attorneys' offices, this is going to continue happening over and over again.
There's a friend of mine, Thomas Enright. He worked at the 108 precinct. I grew up with him since first grade. Tommy had broken, and I'm not getting off the conviction. This goes to support what you're saying, Mr. Dowd. Tommy broke his leg chasing somebody up a fire escape. He was probably in his mid to late 20s at the time. Had been an officer about 6 years. And he's laying in bed, and his son brings him a love letter from his wife's lover that he was cheating on Tommy. What's up, Mr. Enright? Tommy, I'm going to form the podcast. And what happens is when Tommy, with his leg in a cast, screams at his wife, as he told me, she gets on the phone, calls 911. My husband's an officer. He's got a 9mm. He threatened to shoot me. Tommy would never do that. But guess what happened? His own precinct and the local precinct showed up in Jackson Heights, Queens, where he lives. They took his firearm until further investigation. The reason I bring that up is, Mr. Dowd, can you imagine even as back as 2005? Let's say, arguably, even if I was a cop myself, and an officer sees burns and bruises while responding to a domestic violence, do you think they would have covered up for me and told me go in the house that night?
This is explaining my point. They didn't see it because it wasn't there. They would have made an arrest.
At trial, they said they saw burns and bruises, though.
Back at that time with domestic violence, it's a must arrest.
Yes,
you could not tell them, oh no, they would have saw the injuries and they would have had to arrest him.
Okay, all right. Now the DA at my sentencing tells the jury that he has phone. Pardon me. The DA at my sentencing tells the judge, the jury had been excused, that he had 47 minutes of recorded phone calls, and in those phone calls, right, I threatened, try and bribe and coerce her. Yet he refused to play those calls. From the moment I got to my first law library, had no more money for lawyers. I had invested everything into my then label, Patriot Records. And bottom line is, I had to learn law. I had an auntie and a father willing to mortgage this. I said, no, look what happened with a lawyer we gave over $100,000. So, why do that? I'm going to learn. I can learn. But one thing I learned is it's very ironic that all of the evidences, including those recorded phone calls that prove my innocence, they refuse to play. They refuse to acknowledge it. Here, you could have got me an additional with an order of protection. That could have been an additional felony to take my 18 flat, got to give him the whole 18, which I did, and make it a 25 to life, damn near. Could have put life on the back. In New York State, every 2 years, they could hit you with a parole board. And 4 of those is what? Another 8 years. So why wouldn't they play? Because in those phone calls, I said, Diane, please come forward and tell the truth. My father's old. He needs me. Her response was, Joey, if I tell the truth, I'll go to jail. That geek, meaning ADA John Carroll, may he rest in peace, will put me in jail. And now, part of the record, and this is part of the record that I love John Jay Criminal Law School, any law schools in the whole nation to look at. Part of the record, there's a hearing when I'm out on bail. And it's read on the record that Miss Diane's family told the DA's office that she had ran to Brazil, that she didn't want to come to trial because she was scared of, she felt like she was in between three rocks and five hard places. The DA, Caruso, and the truth. So she made an affidavit of withdrawal and handed it to my Aunt Marie, my Aunt Mary Gentile, who passed on. May she rest in peace. The DA gave a copy to the DA, my auntie gave a copy to my lawyer. My lawyer, I didn't find out until after trial, my trial lawyer was also friends with Mr. Caruso. Mr. Caruso was 20 years my senior. You know, I was 27, he was 47 when he worked for me in that photo I sent you. So, and Big Herb, to be honest with you, I had recorded a very brief thing I circulated on Facebook and smaller platforms, way smaller than your own. And in those, I said, you know, my applause goes out to Lala Anthony and Kim Kardashian and those who are really trying to bring federal attention to this mass incarceration, wrongful conviction. Mine's a wrongful conviction. There's evidence that both Queens District Attorney's Office, Letitia James, the Honorable Letitia James, her office has to know I'm innocent after looking at all the evidence suppressed to the jury. But the bottom line is, you know, these are problems. I'm not the only one. I'm not that special. There's a whole bunch of brothers right now incarcerated. Like I said, you want to say something, Big Herb?
No, I'm just like, just listening. It just blows me away. I've seen situations where, you know, people make up stuff, but I'm thinking like, damn, you're gonna go all the way to trial and then get on a stand and then make up something like just tell a whole fabricated story, and then you see all the crime and shit going on now, and people are walking around like it's like cowboy land out there right now. Nobody's getting arrested. It blows me away, man. It blows me away because every time I got in trouble, I went to jail. I did my time, but I'm looking now and I'm like, literally, like people who really should be in jail aren't in jail.
You get time out and they running around.
Dude, it's insane, man. And I'm looking like I'm listening to your story, and it's like, wow, I can't believe it, you know.
What I find fascinating. I have other clients that have been coming out of jail on parole, and every one of them when they come out, they're probably more conservative than a lot of conservatives that I know, because they see the difference when the time they spend in jail and when they get on the street, they can't believe the crime that's going on now compared to when they were going in 20 years ago. So there's something going on that.
Look, I was in New York filming for Vice back in 2000. I want to say 2020, maybe 2016, 2017. Flew out there with my mom. Was walking around in Brooklyn. Streets were clean. People, I mean, it was so safe. We were out like 12 at night buying barbecue, hanging out, me and my mom. And somebody sent me, I was doing a live, and somebody said, Big Herc, you couldn't have walked Brooklyn like that like 5 years ago. They cleaned it up. And I'm like, damn. I'm like, this place is clean. I mean, there was construction and shit going on. But I look now, and then when I hear these, I'm like, the shit is almost like it's mind-boggling. Like,
I'm in Brooklyn right now, Herc. This is Brooklyn, Brownsville, right here. Crown Heights, Brownsville area. That's where I'm at right now.
And it's.
But I wanted to talk about one thing.
The feeling,
he's got to be retired, Mr. Dowd, by now. Sergeant Justin Scanlon of NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau. Okay. When I was taken from state custody in 2008, I was brought to MDC in Brooklyn. Was bunking with Mikey Petruso. I get called an illegal visit one day, and it was 3 of them. I'm not angry at them either. They came to visit me, and they were NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau. So I go in the booth, and they were kind of mad. You know, if either any 3 of them, I only got the card for the boss, Sergeant Justin Scanlon of IAB. Gives me his card. He says, Mr. Gentile, do you know any dirty cops that are on the payroll of the mafia? So I smiled, and I said, yeah, I know some dirty cops for you. And all of their, looked like all 3 of them lit up. They travel in 3s back then. I don't know what goes on with them now. But I said, yeah, they lit up. I said, the cops that testified at my trial. So what do you mean? I said, well, at my trial, they said that she had burns and bruises leaving my house. She didn't have a mark on her. I said, I don't know what schmucks from your office, my exact words, God is my witness. I said, I don't know what schmucks from your office went to the 114th, because I was getting word back why it all happened. I said, I don't know what schmucks from your office went to the 114th and made them put this case on me, and all three of them bust out laughing. You know, I'm an older man now. I was like this. I was like
Were there
240.
pictures?
Huh?
Were there photographs of the burns?
At trial, which is a beautiful point you brought up. I never would look at the photos. And and it was taken 2 weeks after she left my house at the DA's
That's what I was
office.
going to say. That there's no
Check
evidence.
this out. When
There's
my
no
lawyer
evidence of
asked
the
them,
injuries the night of.
yeah, my lawyer asked them, why didn't you take photos of these injuries the night she left the house? Officer Michael Tice, Sergeant Favors said, because we didn't have no film for the camera. It's
Oh,
2005. 2005. Everyone got a camera on their phone in '05. It's not 1925, but it gets better. Ready? So when they stop laughing, I'm ready. I'm not lying, Herc. I'm ready to take this big table and the visit to Feds with the IAB and flip it on them because they're laughing. I'm sitting in jail 3 years in. My pop is going downhill fast. He lived to 95 years old, my father. But bottom line is, and he stopped. He said, no, Mr. Gentile, Sergeant Justice Scanlon. He was a decent guy. He says, no. We're the three schmucks that went to the 114. He said, we never told him to lie. And then they left to calm down. His exact words were etched in my heart and mind. He said, we told them to take her complaint and let the DA sort it out. We never told them to lie. He said, do you have on record them saying that at your trial? This is a year after I blew trial. This is 2008. I was on island from '05 all the way to '07. Finally, I blew trial in '06. January '07, I went up north. They took me from up north and brought me to the feds for a whole bunch of other things. You know, I had nothing to do with it anyway. And then I did all my time. I didn't help nobody, put knives in no one's back. I really was wrongfully convicted for this. I'm not capable of this. Any women that knew me, whether they work still in the music industry, that knew me in the streets of New York, I am the most gentlemanly. I don't even cheat on girls, hit girls, do nothing with girls. Let someone comment different. Well, anyway, here's my point. They tell me, Mr. Gentile, do you have that on record? I said, it's at my father's house, a World War II veteran. I said, go to my father's house. He has a whole copy of it. Sergeant Justin Scanlon goes to my father's house in Astoria, Queens. They pick up the entire trial transcript. I'm in tears. I'm thinking I'm going home. I'm going to be vindicated of this disgusting thing. And they leave him a business card. They give him a file number. And then we never hear from them again. I do a 440 motion in New York State. That's anything you're going to bring to the higher courts above where you were convicted. You got to first put in a post conviction 440 motion, which it goes to the original trial court you were in, giving them an opportunity to correct an error or an injustice, like in my case. And then if they deny it, you could go to the appellate division, the court above that, Brooklyn Supreme Court, Queens Supreme Court, etc. So I put it immediately in a 440, the file number, Sergeant Justice Scanlon's name. I begged the court to subpoena the 3 point. Now I'm finding out from the streets that Phil was in a relationship with Diane. And he had access to 3.7 million, stole over $250,000. And this is something the jury never got to hear. They heard that she worked at a family establishment, a bowling alley. And that's what I thought. When I met her, she said she worked at a bowling alley. We were together 6 months. And she was studying to become a nurse like her mom. At my sentencing, then I finally got an investigator. I find out she was working at a gentleman's club or a strip club as a waitress, and as a waitress or whatever. And I never knew this, you know what I'm saying? So this all came out. The jury never got to hear it. To the jury, you want to say something? To the jury, I spoke truthfully. I didn't hide who or what I was, how I grew up, the fact I basically spent from 15 to 21 as a resident of either.
You were dating a woman for 6 months. You thought worked at a bowling alley, that worked at a strip club.
No, that's what she told me when I met her, Big Herc. She said she worked at. The other people that know me will tell you.
But nobody in the neighborhood knew about who this girl really was. I mean,
she was from the Bronx. 1, 2. I met her, a friend in common. Bought her bag with another girl, to my house. 6 months before July 20, 2005. When she showed up, if there's one thing, and again, you get older, God willing, we get wiser, right, Herc? Back then, if I'm dating you, you're Joey's girl. You're not working. Not because I'm going to be violent, because I make money. I worked hard. I did security, construction. I'm not going to lie. I didn't come from poverty. My father had money. I always had money in my pockets since I was born. You know what I mean? But my father said, "Vieni qua, andiamo," in Italian. Come here, hurry up. Giuseppe, how much money? I got $30, Pop. Here. I'm talking about 10 years old, 300 my father put in my pocket. So if girl's dating me, I'm not gonna have them working. So when she told me, "Well, I work, your wife's still late," I said, no. If we're gonna be together, and she lived with me for like 3 months, and then she moved out, and she would go back and forth in my house and her mom's house. But she never had to go to work when she's with me.
I mean, one of the things I keep going back with this case and why we are involved and why we think he's innocent is the night of there is no injuries. 2 weeks later, they take pictures and they're claiming that's from the night of, and that the night of she was kidnapped at gunpoint by him and his buddy that they had at the scene, and they could have arrested him then. And then we have these district attorneys that they don't. Their job is to get to the truth, not to get a conviction. And they should have done their job and say, "Well, officers, how come there's a 2 week delay between this?" And listen, district attorneys' offices, they have a payroll, they have their own investigators. They really should be utilizing their investigators to sort this stuff out before they decide to go forward with these convictions. And because it's easy.
In a situation like this, I mean, you had a paid attorney. They didn't have an investigator put these pieces of the puzzle together. Like this is on the case.
This is the problem. This is the problem. Let me step in here for a minute. This is the problem we find a lot too. Is that you have defense attorneys, and they don't utilize. They'll go to a client like him and say, "You give me $25,000, I'll try the case. And don't worry about the investigator. I'll deal with it." And then for him, it was $100,000, which is crazy. At those times, $100,000 was a homicide, not a rape.
Yeah. And then you tell the investigator.
And then these attorneys will go, "Well, you know what? I'm gonna wing it. I'm gonna beat up some witnesses and give it a shot and try to get them off." And there's a lot of those attorneys around back in the day. A lot of them now have passed on, but they were back then. There's a lot of them, and they didn't hire any investigators. And years later, we get them as 440s, and we got to tear it apart again and realize they didn't have an investigator. They never did the interviews, or if they had an investigator, he wasn't adequate enough, or the extra $5,000 didn't do anything. And these guys sit in jail. And they said, I think about 10% of these kind of circumstantial cases, they're innocent, or the government didn't prove the case, but there's no one effectively advocating for these people.
Well, so in your opinion, are most of these people convicted on a false police report? Because it seems like the police report was the convicting factor in this whole case, because nobody put the dates. I mean,
ready for this? And they wouldn't let it in at trial, the original police report. They let in a DD-5 made 2 weeks later. DD-5 is the detective report. Detective report goes to the prosecutor. Prosecutor draws up what they call the accusatory felony complaint. When they take that felony complaint, the felony complaint then goes to a grand jury to indict, right? The kid, Peter DiPignano, I haven't seen him, since I've been home. He took the ride with me to the Bronx, who was my co-defendant. He copped out.
So he got charged too.
He got charged, yes. But here's the ironic part. 13 years they hid his plea transcripts. 13 years of my conviction. I finally got my hands on them a couple of years back. Well, and I did so by repetitively claiming that they gave him a plea deal, but they didn't. In New York State, they have to give what they call an interested witness charge. That means that the judge got to tell the jury that Mr. DiPignano or Mr. Gentile or Mr. Dowd has a reason to lie because he gained a plea deal to testify against Mr. Herc, right? Okay, they didn't do that, so I kept putting that in 440s. The real intention behind me making that allegation was to get my hands on. They wouldn't give me his plea minutes. It should have been turned over at discovery, as everyone knows. They've seen the movie My Cousin Vinny, everybody knows that. Well, they never gave them. I'm doing FOIL motions, Freedom of Information law. The moment I get up north, I want those transcripts. When I finally, 10 years in, I do another post-conviction motion, alleging they gave him a plea deal. I get his plea transcripts. The DA, the same DA that prosecuted me in my trial, prosecuted him, not the head DA, the same assistant district attorney, ADA. They dismissed all felony charges, including rape and assault and all that, saying that the injuries didn't constitute that there were no injuries. There was no hospital stay. That's not what they said in my trial. Now, had we had those and the DA turned them over, Immediate trial. First day of trial, Your Honor, we move to dismiss the indictment against Mr. Gentile because false information was brought to his grand jury. The indictment is fraudulent. Here's the evidence. The DA knew it. The same DA sitting right there went to the judge and for Mr. Pignano and said that all of these charges were not good.
So he did no time?
He did 8 months county on Rikers Island.
But what did he plead out to? For what?
He pled out to criminal possession of a weapon in the 4th degree. See, what the DA's office didn't know is when I'm going to friends of mine, and I hate to do it like this, you got all kinds of guys on the internet. I'm not gonna say their names. The only guy's name I'll say is I understand later down the road, and you hear a lot of guys like
Even the
let me
reason
digress, Mr. Dowd. There's a
All right.
reason because you got guys like Sammy the Bill Gravano, you know, and I have respect for Mr. Gravano. In his era, any guys that's way before my 2 decades before my generation, Mr. Gravano was a wise guy's wise guy, a gangster's gangster. Hold water, never do nothing wrong, always buy the book, everything else. So you hear other guys that have official thumbs up on them say good things about Mr. Gravano today, and they'll say it on social media. I'll just say this, that when it all boils down to it, there's a lot of simple factors in my case that prove I'm innocent, like recorded phone calls. There's also, these days, for everyone who hasn't heard about it, brain fingerprint testing. The Seventh Circuit Federal Court found it admissible in criminal proceedings. To give it in a nutshell, it's a 100% accurate, scientifically proven, more accurate than DNA, more accurate than DNA analysis. Time magazine did an article on it, and the cover read, "When is it okay to frame a man for murder?" Dr. Lawrence Farwell developed it. If I could get brain fingerprint testing, it'll prove that I never saw her burns or bruises because I didn't put them there. The way it works.
So what are you guys doing now? I mean, are you just looking to get it overturned? That you're going to sue for punitive damages? I mean,
Well,
this whole story seems like with the Caruso, if you can tie her into having a relationship with him, there's motive there because if he stole money and had a relationship with you by getting you out the picture and then having a relative that was there, if you can show any type of financial gain by anybody increasing their somehow pockets with money, there's somehow.
Oh, yes, there was an increase.
I mean, there's in New York State law, the 440 motions, those bolts probably sailed because they were available at the time of trial. You're looking for newly discovered evidence. So the witness that he's talking about, or the co-defendant he's talking about, and for our job is to get him, is to speak to him, find out if they did make a deal with him, what he remembers happening that night. Because one of the things I think could have happened is that the government does this a lot, and it's not right, but they do it. Is that they'll make a deal with him so they know that the defendant will never call him as a witness. He could have been called as a witness because he was there. There's only 2 people there.
Yeah,
but they can't because he's a co-defendant. So, and I think he gets sentenced after Joe gets convicted. Correct? When did he get sentenced?
3 months before. 3 months before I even started trial.
Right. So they convict him, which excludes him from testifying.
On my behalf as a witness. But here's the ironic part.
When was he sentenced?
He was sentenced before I even started trial, Mr. About a month before.
Some of it, but by keeping the conviction on him, it excludes him from testifying.
Well, there's something else, Mr. Dowd, and I want to say this to anybody
from the story. But now he can't testify. We need to find him, and we've been trying to find him.
That's why I'm addressing now, Mr. Dowd. Anybody from Astoria, Queens, if you see Pete DiPignano, let him know I've never been known to be a sneak, Pete. All right, I know you're the victim in a lot of respect. Anybody that calls Pete's a rat, you're wrong. If I say you, tell me how you feel in my face, and we'll fix that. But with Pete, a lot of people maybe don't know that they dragged him into court. They had to drag him in court. I'm sitting at the table, Mr. Dowd. They exclude the jury. The judge calls the DA over and his lawyer over and says in these words, for every time he says he won't come in and testify against Mr. Gentile, for every time he won't come in, he's going to get another year in jail. He already had said no 3 times. They had him shackled in the hallway of the courthouse. Right. So the poor young guy, not everyone's built the same. Pete ain't no punk, but Rikers Island ain't a good place. And anybody remember me, like, there's non-straight homies. OG.
So they threatened, you're saying that he was threatening if he came to testify, he's going to get a year.
No, for every time he refused, this is what the judge said to him, Big Herc. He said, every time, tell your client, the judge got furious. Come here to both counsels. They approached the bench. I'm at the table with my lawyer. His lawyer, who was some stonad, I mean, stupid guy from Astoria, Queens, a real estate lawyer, comes in, right? I heard he was friends with his mother or whatever, and tells his lawyer, my co-defendant, you tell your client that for every time, he told me no 3 times. He's in the hallway shackled from Rikers, right? He's in the hallway of the courthouse. I'm at the table, defense table, and they kept saying, the judge kept telling the DA, I want him in here. Tell him to come in here. He's going to testify against Mr. Gentile. 3 times he told the judge no. But this is all done after the jury's excused, so they don't hear this. That this guy they got a gun to his head. He said, for every time that I say after this that he better come in here, he's getting a temp charge. He's getting an additional year in jail. So instead of 8 months, it's going to be a year and 8 months. If he says no again, 2 years, 8 months. He's going up north. A lot of guys don't want to go to Attica, Sing Sing, Clinton, Elmira. These jails is no joke. You know what I mean? So they threatened him with unlimited time for every time he'd say no. He comes on the bench, and honestly, I'm still waiting for Pete. I love him like a little brother. I'm still waiting for him to get on the stand and be like, yo, this is all a fucking lie. I know pardon my language, bigger. I know Joey didn't do nothing. And, he just sat there and let the DA lead him into whatever he was going to say. He's saying, oh, I heard screams. I heard this. All kinds of, did you witness him burn? No. I witnessed where he put his gun. And I'm just sitting there like, I can't tell you. He's got 4 brothers. Anthony and a few others. There's all your brothers from Anthony on. If they had a problem, Pete, who was there for you? All right, so you know what I mean? They had problems hiding in a club because someone was going to rob them. Joey would get out of bed 3 a.m. and show up and take them out safely. But
by them doing what they did, it allowed them not to be able to be a defense attorney witness, and that's very common that it happens. Instead of really allowing the truth to come out, they did this instead. And like I said before, I mean, there's no evidence of any of these injuries happening the night of this incident, the night they're claiming that it happened.
Well,
they never got in front of the jury.
I want to issue an apology, Big Herc.
Well,
I want to apologize.
Your attorney, cross-examination, just, the dates, timestamps of the photos, all this stuff, man. It just is crazy.
I got to say something.
I've been in trouble, man, but I'm just saying, and I know guys who got busted for conspiracy, never got caught with dope, and never even seen their person on their indictment. But for somebody to make up all that shit, dude, that right there to me, is mind-boggling.
But it really happened. And I'll say this: there's an aspect of this that, I mean, you have to have gone through it and lived it as I've lived it to realize it to be true. You have a number of police officers that worked the 114 precinct NYPD between 2000 and 2007. And they'll all know of this story because the Internal Affairs Bureau interviewed every police officer there. And all of them told IAB that, again, I basically, that she left my house without a mark. Okay, none of them were sanctioned or whatever, but they just threw me under the bus. There's one other aspect of it as far as whether it's Peter Pignano being threatened to testify against me. His plea transcripts prove, the phone calls prove 100% that I'm innocent. 100%. When I asked Diane, I said, Diane, who burned you with a cigarette? This is from Rikers Island. They're recorded. They tell you they're being recorded. I said,
you're recording again now.
Someone tried to call me. I'm sorry, Big Herc. I just shut them off. But in any event, she said, I don't want to talk about that. She spoke about Phil Caruso on the phone, and, being concerned. So I kind of get it. She was a young lady between a rock and a hard place. The ironic part is there's some things I'm leaving out of this. I think we've kind of covered almost all the bases, but, I submitted a post-conviction motion myself, pro se, before leaving prison, July of 2023. The Queens District Attorney's Office never responded. And you spend time in the library, Big Herc, you know that if they don't oppose what you're submitting, it's a concession. In other words, they're conceding, they're agreeing.
What the takeaway I have from this, from you, Mr. Dowd, as a former law enforcement and now working with these people, because people watching this, they're going to be like, wow, this is crazy. But the biggest takeaway for people watching, what would you give as far as advice if somebody is dealing with a situation or how to navigate in something like this? I mean, nowadays, you got a lot of, people making accusations. Luckily, you have text you can go back and find, or, social media posts. Because I've seen where, certain women have said stuff or people have said stuff about somebody and they're able to kind of show something that's, valid in court. But what would you advise somebody watching this? Because, to not get caught up in something like this.
Well, today with the social media is so active and your phones, these phones all have cameras, and so there's a lot of this situation that happened with Joe a little bit harder to do, but it's still. But it still can happen. I mean, if something like today, you have a problem with police come to your house, don't say anything. Call a lawyer, document. Be polite. I mean, listen, the police department, the police officer's job is difficult. I mean, it is a difficult situation. I mean, you're asking them to make decisions in a split of a moment and come up with some kind of a story, and that's their job. But for a citizen is that you got to really just protect your rights. And your rights are you don't have to talk to anyone. You don't have to let anyone in your car. You don't have to let anyone into your house. But be polite. I mean, people get themselves in trouble is that if you start pushing the envelope, being this is my right, I'm not going to talk to you. Well, there's no ways around that. I mean, it was one step in the wrong direction. All of a sudden, you're becoming in
tased, you're being pepper sprayed, you're being beat up.
Right, you're going to get tased.
How powerful would you say? Because I always tell people too, when you're dealing with stuff legally, I always tell people use affidavits. When you're dealing with people privately and have a record of that just to show, because that kind of puts you under a different type of status rather than an undeclared, like a unsworn declaration. So when you're dealing with, like, say somebody puts an affidavit on your behalf to a situation, that holds more weight in court than somebody just making up an accusation.
If you're in jail, if you're in jail and you've been convicted, everything needs to be
in New York State. Tell them.
And we do work all over the country. If you have someone that's recanting a statement, it better be in an affidavit form and sworn under oath.
And
anything else is nonsense.
Even post-conviction and still the courts, Mr. Dowd, I've seen numerous cases deny it, saying it was made under duress. Let
me dive into some more. A recantation statement alone is not enough. I tell it all the time to the clients that we have that are in jail. You have to corroborate that recantation because it put in the minds of the judge who sat through the trial. And I'm being the devil's advocate. You had a witness came in. He said A, B, C in front of the jury. 10, 15 years later, he says, well, I was forced to lie because of A, B, and C. All these people are dead and moved on. You need to, first you get it in an affidavit form, and then you got to corroborate what he's saying. Does there other people that he would have said it to? Are there, he's describing something that was not there that was there, and it's difficult. I'm telling you, 440 motions and wrongful conviction cases, and they're not easy things to go overturn. I mean, it's just it takes 10 years on the average.
A lot of work. I would like to say there's a case, the leading case in New York State's called, I was actually had the honor of meeting him briefly in Law Library at Greenhaven 2012, a genius of a brother named Derek Hamilton, Mr. Hamilton, People v. Hamilton, a Second Department Appellate Division decision in 2013, I believe it was. And he actually, they granted his actual innocence motion when he was on parole. He relied upon a case. I'm bringing this up, Big Herc, for any of the law schools in the country or here in New York that overhear this need law students. Please, we can use any legal team possible. One of the lawyers that myself and Mr. Dowd deal with is really overburdened right now. So any fresh eyes on this would be great. But Mr. Hamilton relied upon a case called Wheeler. And in that Wheeler, it reads like New Jack City, like a Nino Brown, ghost-like character, killing a whole bunch of people in Marcy Projects in Brooklyn where Jay-Z grew up at. And then when he gets to Mr. Hamilton, he tells Mr. Hamilton, you're going to get down or lay down type of thing. He ended up getting framed. He got framed, and that was Mr. Wheeler. And Mr. Wheeler got framed. It's a case that Mr. Hamilton relied upon. He got framed by this person like a ghost. That was actually his name in the case. And they granted his motion and overturned the conviction because the sister that had an addiction was paid crack cocaine to lie and say that she saw Mr. Wheeler shoot this other drug dealer. That's how intricate. And my situation, I've made notes of everything since 2008 to prove my innocence. I mean, Letitia James's office, God bless Letitia James, she's our Attorney General, and Kathy Hochul's office, our current governor. I made a petition I put online on change.org requesting, I only have a couple of thousand signatures, them to play the recorded phone calls that prove I'm innocent. That's how easy my case is. The horse's mouth while I'm being held without bail to just speak the truth. So I asked her. Her response is she said the truth, she'd go to prison, and she was also fearful of Phil Caruso. Why would the DA and judge send an innocent man to jail? Besides the monetary factor with Phil and what's going on there, and again, made record of this, spoke about it on those 47 minutes of recorded phone calls. What would be the motivating factor? Why would a judge and DA, one, like Mr. Dowd, on face value, when you have the high volume of people? I took a pinch. I took an arrest in Buffalo.
Let me just diverse a little bit. What I'm
Yes,
trying to say is that on your matter, why would a judge do that? The judge, it's easy for him. He's an arbitrator between the two sides. So he has a woman saying, "This is what happened to me."
Uh-huh.
And you have your defense saying, "This is what didn't happen." So he just sits there and arbitrates. The problem with New York State is that the judges that you have, most of them have a connection to the district attorneys. The way they're elected,
trial judge who's been deceased,
the way they're elected,
15-year prosecutor.
The way they are elected. I'm not just saying about your case. Herb was asking generally how these things happen. Is that so? The judges in especially in Queens, the connection between the judges and the district attorney's office are they all work for the district attorney, and they get appointed to these judgeships through the district attorney. And then they're no longer blind and an arbitrator to the truth. They are leaning towards the prosecution side, and then that's another way that people get wrongfully convicted. And then you have prosecutors that have this relationship with the police department that is really way too close. Then you look at homicides. This has to do with not just New York State. You have medical examiners that have these connections with the police department and the DAs, and they gear their cases towards that. Oh, it's a homicide. Oh no, it had to have happened this. And then when you go back and look at the science, it doesn't. And the interesting thing with my company is that we have cases, and we have a case in Florida, New Orleans. We also do wrongful death cases. So now I have a medical examiner saying, "Oh, this is a suicide," because why? Well, the DA, the detective told me it was, but the woman's got a shot in the back of the head, and there's no way she could have done it to herself. And there's two guns laying in front of her, so it goes both ways. So this is like the comfortness between all of these different agencies allows wrongful convictions to happen and continue to happen to this day. And that until you can clear this up, where these people aren't all thinking, some think that they're doing God's work, and that we're speaking for the dead, and all these kinds of nuances. Until they really say we're here to find the truth, people are going to get wrongfully convicted.